social media presence is another big thing that we do. And it's everything from having a good LinkedIn profile and what that actually looks like and should look like, to not having an open and freely viewable Instagram thing, right? I don't do this routinely, but a lot of jobs will be very open about that. They will look at social media.
With negotiating salaries and compensation packages, as well as building wealth and looking at kind of how you can establish a plan. And I know many new grads are not thinking about that just yet, but it is very important, especially when you're staring down student loans, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is like my favorite. And again, I'm not a financial advisor, but contract negotiations are, which essentially is salary negotiation, right? So some places, and it's a business. And so people really take this to heart, right? And I get it. It's your money. But the problem is that oftentimes, unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, your value and your work and all of this, all of the stuff that you're doing isn't always going to be reflected in an additional amount of salary, right? And that doesn't reflect on you, right? I would love for every provider that works, underneath me and worth me to get more money every single year. I get it, but it's a hospital. The medical system is kind of a mess. And so there's just not infinite money. And so there's a couple of things that happen with negotiation is that one, absolutely have to advocate for yourself. You are the only person that's going to advocate. I will advocate for all of my providers, but you are the most important person to advocate for you because it affects you directly. I'm here to also advocate for everybody, but it's more powerful if it comes from you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Healthy Careers Podcast. In 2024, we reached over 32,000 listeners and ranked in the top 15% of all podcasts. We're proud to have SharePro Health as a sponsor and are currently looking for 2 more partners in 2025. If you're looking to connect with healthcare leaders, providers, and innovators, we'd love to spread the word about your service, product, or business. Reach out to me, Maddie, for more details.
But you also have to be prepared if they say no, that it's probably not because you're doing something wrong or you're not good enough or whatever that is. You sense that, right? It's a rejection in a sense, but it's just the reality of being in a business. And so I think that when you have negotiations, you have to come at it with a little bit of a different mindset in that, you're asking for more. And I think that to do that, I always kind of grew up in this organization where you had to show what that additional value was. Dr. Johnson was always a numbers-based person. So if I went to him and I just said, hey, I've been doing a lot, that's not nearly as powerful as I wrote the schedule the last 12 months and here's the amount of, whatever this and this and this. So you should be able to show that data. The people that are making the decisions on whether you get more money or not are almost never in the room. They don't understand what you're doing on a regular basis. That you can very frequently just be a name on a spreadsheet and they're just going to say, okay, well, this person's just here, they stayed here and they keep that same amount of money. So, the opportunity to showcase what you've done is huge. So I think having a list of your accomplishments kind of throughout the year and keeping that, and those are things what I look for and what I always advocate for are stuff that's not expected in the job, right? Years of experience on the job doesn't necessarily mean more value to the job, right? 20 years of experience may just be the same year of experience repeated 20 times. So that's different than adding value and doing additional things. But at the same time, I did a lot of stuff that I wasn't compensated for. It just happened to be what I wanted to do and to build and to try and, long kind of game, how you wanted to do it. But not everybody is like that, right? A lot of people want that instant gratification, that yearly gratification. I also want that for them. So I think there's some ways to sit down and prepare yourself mentally for how do you ask for more money? What do you do if they say no? Is that 100% a deal breaker, right? If it's $5,000 and $7,000 broken up over 26 pay periods, compared to the cost of moving and going to another job and doing all of that, right? It's not as dramatic as I think a lot of people make it seem, but at the same time, it's important to do, right? And that's also a huge thing that requires practice, almost more so than, the interview process, because now you're with the leader of your organization or whoever that is, and it's not confrontational, but people are always weirded out by that, right? It's a weird thing to ask somebody for more money, especially it's super weird too, because oftentimes it's not that person that's making that decision anyway, right? Is that person that has to give that information to somebody else and then takes that information to somebody else. So, I think that that's another thing where practice and just talking to somebody about what their experience has been negotiating for their own salaries and what my experience has been like negotiating for myself, what's worked for me, what hasn't worked for me, and having all of those things, which, you can then try and use in your organization is huge. And then the wealth building part of it, this is what I love, right? Is that we all do this for a number of different reasons, but obviously PAs make good amount of money compared to the United States, right? You're top 10% of salaries in the country. So what do you do with all of that money? I came from very, middle class beginnings. And so you suddenly are making more than $100,000 a year, whatever that is, as a new grad. Having some type of plan in place is very important. I worked with a woman that, after working with her for a year and a half, we kind of were just talking back and forth, and I knew what she made. We made the same amount of money. And like, after a year and a half of working in our job, she was like, still had, $20,000 in credit card debt. And I was like, well, what are you doing? Like, why haven't, it's like 30% interest rates. Like, what are you? And
Yeah.
so
Good
but
Lord.
it's, I think people can run into some problems, right? We all work for many reasons. We have stuff that we want to spend money on. So I'm never going to tell you to not spend money on the stuff that really is important to you. But at the same time, you do have school loans, right? School loans kick in. What does all this look like? I think there's a lot of stages in life, your early career, your mid career, your late career, that if you did things in the early part of your career, your mid and late become tremendously better, right? You can get to the point where work will eventually become an option for you instead of a necessity. And so there's not a great reason for somebody that's making $130,000 at the beginning of their career, which is potentially going to increase, as you go, that you shouldn't be able to retire when you want to, right? That's a really good salary. And if you're doing that for 30 years or 20 something years, there are some things that you should do in the beginning with 401k and IRA and brokerage accounts that, again, without being a financial advisor, just telling you what those options are, how to, what I did, right? What I tell the other, PAs and NPs that I work with, what I encourage them to do. Each individual situation is different, but, just saving in general, right? And planning for things and planning for emergencies. I think that you need somebody that has no vested interest in your money that tells you, like, here's what you should be doing, right? Spend this amount of money and do all this. And it sounds so obvious and it's coached all over the internet and everything. But I think hearing it from somebody that's in a similar position as you, that had similar income and it will have similar struggles that you'll have kind of throughout your career, makes it a little bit different than just reading a blog post about it. I think that's a big difference.
Yeah. And I mean,